Hey guys, so I was doing some stuff for the assessment class the other day, and some of you are going to be seeing this through that. Some of you might be seeing this through the RMHC resource site because I'm going to post this also in there. So, however you're coming to this, I want to talk to you a little bit about laws and regulations in the state of Montana for counseling. Some of this will apply to other states, kind of the beginning part of it, and the rest of it's going to be specific to Montana. So you might want to stick around for a little bit of this, but I'll try and get the stuff that's going to be relevant to everybody out of the way first, and then talk specifically about Montana. But here's why I'm doing this. When I went through my graduate program, people would say, make sure you're following the rules and regulations and laws of your state so you don't do anything illegal. And I said, okay, great. I want to do that. I don't want to be illegal. That would be a bad thing. But I didn't even know where to find them or how to navigate through that process. And so I wanted to leave just some, as quick as I can, leave some information for you to help you out with that. So I'm going to show you first how to navigate to that for the state of Montana at least, and then talk about kind of how things are organized so you can find it in a different state if you need to. But I'm going to pull up a web browser and search for whatever state you have. In this case, it's Montana Board of Behavioral Health. And I might spell that wrong, but the internets will find it. So here's Montana's Board of Behavioral Health. Now, just a quick aside about the Board of Behavioral Health. Every single state has a Board of Behavioral Health or some kind of it. If you search for whatever your state is in Board of Behavioral Health, you'll find something. Sometimes they're called like the Board of Behavioral Health Sciences or something like that. But you should get to something. They're all going to look different. All of the website's actually pretty good. It was updated in the last year or two, but not all of them are really that good, and some of them are really hard to navigate. So I'm going to try and leave some general principles here and talk about some general stuff. But this looking for laws and regulations is just going to be something you have to get used to and get some practice at. It's kind of like figuring out how to look through a dictionary the first time until you really understand alphabetical order of the first letter and then the second letter and then the third letter. It's hard to find things. It just looks like a big mess of information. Or maybe a better analogy is looking through, you go to Amazon or Facebook and all these websites that have all kinds of buttons and things to click on. The first time you do it, it's completely disorienting. But then once you kind of get comfortable with what are the important buttons and where am I going to navigate to, then it makes sense. And this is just like that. So generally speaking, when we're talking about the Board of Behavioral Health, almost always it's under the heading, and you can see it kind of up there in the top left. It's under the heading of the Department of Labor and Industry, and I don't know if this is true for all states, but I'm like, well, I don't know how confident I am, but in most states that I've looked at, which is maybe a third of the 50 states, 10 or 20 of them or something, they usually fall under the Department of Labor and Industry. That may not be true of everywhere. Nevertheless, if you Google it, you'll find it, basically. So when we as a program, when we talk to you about what is the behavior and what are the boundaries inside and outside of what it means to be a counselor, what's okay and what's not okay, we generally speaking talk about the code of ethics. Usually it's the ACA code of ethics for those of you that want to do mental health counseling work and want to get licensed. That's what licensing boards recognize because that's the professional field of counseling. For those of you that just want to do rehabilitation counseling, the CRC code of ethics is what you would adhere to mostly. And if you want to get certified and licensed, then you'll have both of them to navigate through as well. However, each individual state has a vested interest in public welfare, right? Like the state wants to be healthy and function, and each state has its unique circumstances. So in theory anyway, the way we do our political system works is the people represent an individual and that person represents the interest of public health. And the legislature then, the Senate and the House of every state gets to pass laws based on what's good for the people in that state. Because those laws need to be regulated and monitored, they develop a board of behavioral health to say, okay, you guys help us regulate this profession, okay? But the people of the state don't necessarily know what counseling is and how it works. They just know that they want the state to be healthy, and so they have some regulations, but they don't really understand it that much. The profession knows what good counseling behavior should look like from what's appropriate behavior look like, but they don't know the unique circumstances of every individual state. So there's the politicians and the people and the professional counselors. The Board of Behavioral Health kind of sits in the in-between of that, saying we know the issues of our state, and we also know what what professional counseling should look like, and so we're going to help kind of mesh those two things, okay? So when we're looking at what's the purpose of the Board of Behavioral Health and what do they do, it's kind of that crossover between what's the laws of our local place, local communities, and what we know about counseling. Okay, so this will make a little more sense when I show you something else here in a second. I'm going to zoom out because I want to see this over on the left-hand side there. I want to see this thing. If you are in the later stages of the program and you're already thinking about licensure, you may have already seen this website and you've gone here. There's another video on the RMHC resource site that talks about navigating through the licensing process a little bit. I'm going to skip over that for now because I want to focus on this section called regulations. Now, there are two things that I want to mention here. There are 4 options, but 2 of them I want to talk about. One is administrative rules, and the other one, this one right here, and the other one is statutes. When I say that the legislature focuses on the interests of public health and the professional field of counseling cares about ethical behavior, and the board is kind of the crossover, when we're talking about statutes, we're talking about what kind of laws does the legislature actually make that guide the field of counseling, knowing that they don't really understand what counselors do. That's what statutes are. Okay, so I'm going to show you these in just a second, but it's really these sort of overarching things of how does the board organize and what do we want to make sure is involved in the public welfare, basically. The administrative rules are what are determined by the Board of Behavioral Health in terms of how they function and how they regulate individual professions. That includes people like social workers, counselors, psychologists, peer support specialists, addiction counselors, that kind of thing. So it's not just us as counselors, it's a couple different groups of people. So let's take a look at these statutes here first, because these are a little messier and they're a little bit less relevant to what our specific work as counselors are, the stuff you probably will be interested in. But as we go here, let's go to professional counseling right above my head. And this is even harder to see. As you can see, there's not a ton here. I'm going to click on licensing just to kind of give you an example. There are things that, laws that used to be enacted or active, I guess I don't know the right term for it exactly, but some of them have since been repealed. You can go back and look through the history of the laws and all that kind of stuff if you're interested. This section about fees, basically it just says like you have to pay a fee in order to get licensed. The law requires it. So it's not terribly interesting to us. You can look through a bunch of this other stuff. We'll actually maybe link to it here in a little bit. But the rules of the board, they're always looking at, well, what's the legal standard for this, and how do we need to follow laws that are already in place? And they will link to some of the laws, and the laws give guidance to this. So most of this, we don't have to really pay too much attention to, but we will come back to some of this. Now here's, there are some definitions about like, what is the definition of a counselor and, what is all this stuff? I don't even know what this is. I'm going to get out of here because I don't want to have to explain something I don't know. It'll make me look stupid. Just kidding. But licensure requirements, this is the big one that you'll probably want to take a look at. When we as a program say, okay, well, how do we set people up to get prepared for licensure? This is where we go and we look at these things. We know that you have to get 3,000 hours, and we know that at least half of which have to be post-degree or after you graduate. That's where when we say 1,500 or half of your 3,000 hours, we can get during the program. So your internship counts, your practicum counts, and if you're working through the summer, let's say at the place that you did your practicum, waiting for internship to start, those hours won't count towards the program, but they will count towards this 1,500. This is where it comes from. It's a law in Montana that allows that to happen. You have to pass an examination, this kind of stuff. So this is coming from the law, okay? But I don't want to spend too much time talking about the laws necessarily. I want to talk about the administrative rules because there's a little bit more in there, specifically when it comes to talking about assessments and psychological assessment for those that have been through that class. There's a few things I want to comment to specifically to those of you who've been through that. Or if you're going through it, this might be interesting to you then. Okay, so let's go back. We'll get out of this. Here we are back at the Board of Behavioral Health website, and I'm going to go from rule notices, statutes, here we are, to administrative rules. This is probably going to be a little bit more interesting to us. So just as a quick side note, this business standards division stuff, the Department of Labor and Industry also licenses people like plumbers and electricians. That's what this is all about, so we can kind of ignore that. We want to go to the division of the Department of Labor, the Board of Behavioral Health, because they oversee people like nurses and psychologists and social workers and us and other people as well. But this is where we want to start. Okay, so this is the website you're going to want to, you might even just bookmark this or, just know how to navigate to it, because you're probably going to want to come back here from time to time, especially as you're walking through the application for license process. And if you come back for continuing education credits, which everybody's going to have to get later, you'll want to know like how often do I have to apply and how much it's going to cost and that kind of stuff. And here's where you can find that information. So it's a good one to keep on hand. Some of this stuff is just about how the board organizes itself. How often do they have meetings? Who can be on the board? Do they have to be public meetings, open to the public? Stuff like that. So we don't have to care about that too much. Procedural rules for the board, that kind of thing. What we do want to look at, I guess this one's kind of interesting. Fee schedules for professional counselors. How much does it cost to apply for a license? This one is actually repealed, as you can see right above my head. I clicked on it earlier and I was like, why does it not give me good information? Well, it's because it's old. That's really why. But up here, it'll tell you how much it costs. I think it's $200 for an application fee for an LCPC. There you go. And it tells you a whole bunch of stuff about other fields too. If you're renewing, it's only $75. So that's where you can find some of that information. Let's go down though and look more at. We don't have to care about this one because this is for social workers. But here is some interesting stuff. Now, when I say that we as a program look at these kind of things to make sure, are we setting you guys up for success to get licensed in the best possible way, or to have the easiest time at doing it, to make sure you're ready for it. These are the places that I went through and read these things to make sure you're ready. So there's what are the requirements to be a licensed candidate? I get a lot of questions from you guys, and you're welcome to email me and ask me these questions, but this is where I learn these things. I read through this so that I can help you navigate it. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to read through, but here are just some examples. You're not currently licensed in another state. You must have a degree that is primarily counseling in nature, which you do. It has to be from an accredited institution, and this is why we value the CACREP accreditation so much and want to save it and are really proud of it, because it helps you guys get licensed. Like, you have to have that in order to get licensed. And there's some other stuff in here that is a little bit less important. Well, it's not less important, I guess, but like your supervisor has to meet requirements. And I'm not going to click on this right now, but they have to have well, actually, let's do it. Here we go again. This is taking us back to the administrative rules, different section of it. What are the requirements for a supervisor? You can read through this at your leisure if you want to. When we say that the supervisor has to be independently licensed for at least 3 years, this is where we get that from. So I'm just going to back out of this because I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole here. And let's go back to here. There's all kinds of stuff about the examination by the National Board of Certified Counselors, the NBCC. That's why we encourage you to take the NCE, or the National Counseling Exam. That's your board exams. You take those by the people that Montana says you're supposed to. Other states require another test too. It's offered by the NBCC as well. There's 2 of them, and I always forget the acronym because it's like 5 or 6 letters long, and it's not even that long, but apparently my brain can't keep that in my head for some reason. But it's like NMHC something, National Mental Health Counseling Examination or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but Because some states require that you take that one instead of the NCE, whatever. But that's something you'll have to navigate through in other states. You can read down this list, supervised work experience requirements. A lot of you have really good questions that even if you've gone here, you still don't have a real good answer to, because there's plenty of gray area and complicated things, which is what I see it as kind of my job as the clinical coordinator to understand. I've read through these things. You guys can read through them as well. But there are also some situations that I've run into in the past where you wouldn't necessarily find a good answer in here. But I know just from talking to board members and from part of the executive director of the board, that kind of stuff, situations that have come up in the past, how they interpret the rules and laws in order to work with people's individual circumstances. So I can help you with some of that stuff too. But you'll definitely want to get to know what the laws are here. Here again, this is marriage and family therapists, rules of ethics. Let's go down to the other stuff. Okay, so this is where if you, I don't think I've seen the same kind of psychological assessment section in other states. If you're not in the assessment class and you don't care about this, is when you can stop. By the way, if you're from another state and you're still watching, you might find this assessment stuff interesting, but this is uniquely Montana, so it probably won't apply to you. But there are all kinds of sort of guidelines for what you can use, what education you have to get in order to have it. How do you need to include informed consent in the use of assessments? And the answer is yes, but like, what does that look like? You can click on that here. I'm going to click on one of these because I think it's kind of interesting. Not this one. That one's probably interesting too. But educational requirements. I just want to kind of point out a few things. In that class, we talk about statistics and we talk about validity and reliability. And I've had people say, why do we have to cover this stuff? Why is it important? And the answer that I generally give is, well, I want you to be able to have enough knowledge and enough information that the entire profession of counseling thinks it's important so that you can pass the test to get licensed. Also, the state of Montana requires that you have competency in some of these areas, okay? So have you been trained at the graduate level from a regionally accredited program? Yes. That covers descriptive statistics. Do we cover that in class? We do. Reliability and measurement error? Yes, we do. Validity and the meaning of test scores? Yes, we do. Etc., etc., etc. We cover all this stuff because I went through here and I said, do I understand the laws and what's required of people when they get out? Yes, I do. Is that the same thing as being confident and comfortable? Not necessarily. There's some other parts in here that say, where is it? Let's see if I can find it real quick. I'm not going to be able to find it. But we do talk in class about level A, B, and C tests, and that's oversight by the test manufacturers to kind of help put some regulation in place to make sure that we're not practicing outside of our competency level. But the state even has more guidelines or different guidelines about that as well. And basically, the testing companies that say you can do C-level tests, but you'll have to follow the laws and regulations, of which we are not responsible for, and they have probably terms of service that you have to read through and sign that say things like that, because nobody wants to be legally responsible for this. It's your job to be legally responsible, and here's where you find information on what that means. So I've read through this. There's a bunch of gray area, and I've had, we'll call them professional disagreements maybe, or disputes. I don't even like that. Debates. I like debates. That sounds better. They're not fights. But there are opinions about who is qualified and who can do different kinds of assessments and all that stuff. And here's where I land on this issue. There is gray area in here. And what I say is that in our program, we don't necessarily go through specific tests. We talk about general principles, but we don't go through specific tests. So if you're going to go out and use some tests, you can do those with a graduate degree. There's one section here that I thought was kind of, I swear it was in here maybe. I'm not going to find it now that I'm talking on camera. But nevertheless, as long as you have been trained on that test, and that doesn't mean necessarily in school, but it could be from a future supervisor, you've been supervised, someone's kind of overseen that and helped you learn that, then you're qualified to do that test. You have to understand a little bit about the development of the test. You have to know about its reliability and validity, measurement error, things like that. And then also how to do interpretations of those tests. But once you do that, you're qualified to do it. And there's laws in here that I can't find right now that say if you're a licensed professional clinical counselor, licensed clinical professional counselor, LCPC, that you're allowed to do these things. And so you can read through these more if you want to. And if you want to do, if you're nervous about certain kinds of tests and like, boy, this is a level C test and I'm only have a graduate level and I thought I had to have a doctoral degree, but Aaron said that you could get supervision and do these things. Here's how I justify that. What becomes adequate knowledge and information? Well, that's where ethics comes in. You get to decide that with your supervisor. Do they think you're competent and ready? Do other people in the field generally agree that like you're doing these well, that kind of stuff? And it gets a little hairy there, and of course I'm happy to talk to you about those later. But anyway, it's good to know that this exists, so you have a little more guidance. Proper diagnosis, test selection, conditions of administration. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Diversity, it's a big one. Bunch of stuff in here that you can look at that probably be helpful for you if you really get into this area of assessment. And I encourage all of you to really consider that. Of course, I've talked to you in class about making the argument for why these can be helpful and how they can contribute to your practices. But some people just don't go there, and that's fine, whatever. I think that's pretty much all I want to cover. There's a bunch of other stuff in here, like about unprofessional conduct and what do you do, what is the complaint procedure like if you have concerns about other counselors and stuff. This is where we get all that from. But that's pretty much all I want to cover for now. So I think I'm going to leave it here, but hopefully this was helpful to you. May not be immediately helpful now, but it probably will be helpful in your future career. So good luck, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.